Okay. So I hope everybody has had a good week, a healthy week, uh, a week in which we appreciated the brachot that we all have. It continues to be a week of a lot of frustration and unsettlement, and just before we started tonight, my kids are texting me back and forth with the President of the United States' last request that Israel unilaterally have a ceasefire. Just that's it, just stop. And my kids are saying, and the hostages, like nobody's even talking about them anymore. Just let's stop fighting. It's okay, finish. Let's give everybody a chance to catch their breath. Like it's on nobody's agenda. It's an upsetting and it's a disturbing development. And maybe in 25 to 30, 50 years, we'll look back and we'll understand how all of these pieces fit together, and that we'll have the benefit of an understanding of how this is part of Hashem's plan. But as we go through it, as you know, it feels unsettling, at least to me, and I'm sure to many, many others. So may our Limud Torah tonight be a schut for that. So we are going to be learning Parsha Tazria. Not a simple Parsha, this Parsha and next Parsha. So I like to think that I'm really smart, because next Parsha is when we're doing the Haggadah. So I've saved myself from Parsha Metzora. Phew. But nonetheless, here we are, Parsha Tazria. There is a lot to talk about. There really is. But when you take a look and read through Parsha Tazria, there's a lot of it which deals with a part of life that the Torah establishes as a reality, but we struggle to understand it. And that's the reality of spiritual tumah and tahara. How could that be? How could something be tahor? How could something be tameh? And here, of course, the physical words contaminated or clean or unclean are very often not really very helpful. They create a sort of conceptual framework that doesn't necessarily lend itself for us getting closer to the real meaning. It's not about contamination. If I held up, as I said often, a glass of water to you, is to take a look at this water, and it might even test to be clean. It doesn't have minerals, it doesn't have any toxins in it, but it could still be tameh. It could still be ritually impure, because the definitions of pure and impure have nothing to do, most of the time in life, with anything physical. So here the Torah begins to describe to us notions of a state of physical impurity, but here's where it gets fascinating. The sign of the physical impurity, something that's wrong within us, in this case, this Parsha and next Parsha, actually have an external physical manifestation, which becomes signs that something inside is wrong. And what that inside is, it's a spiritual malaise. So we're going to start Parsha Tazria with a notion, and I'm going to say straight out, I don't have explanations for this. I don't have explanations. The first few psukim from Pasuk Aleph to the end of Pasuk Het deals with the ritual impurity that follows childbirth. And I know that it's going to sound like an anomaly. Well, wait a minute, isn't childbirth a positive thing? And so if it's such a positive thing that a new neshama is brought to the world, and we're mesameach, and we have a simcha, we have a bris, maybe a simcha rabat, we say shechiyanu, we're dancing, we're singing, we're making a kiddush, and yet the Torah somehow says, all true, but following that, there's an imposed period of tumah on the woman, and which means she and her husband need to separate. Like, why? Often there may be a sense of tumah that follows a transgression, an avera, where the Torah tells us if a person were to engage in some inappropriate behavior, which is explicitly talked about in the Torah, so then there's often a series of consequences. A person comes in contact with a dead body, so that's not exactly an avera, but the dead body represents the exact opposite of what life ought to be. So coming into contact with the dead body does create a sense of tumah for the person who either touched the body or actually was found under the same roof as a dead body. And so there are different korbanot and different processes, protocols that the person has to undergo. But this week's Parsha, Tazria, starts with the notion of childbirth and introduces the idea of tumah. But in the very discussion of that, the Torah tells us the following, and I'm reading now from Pasuk Gimel. Uvayom Hashemini Yimol Desar Orlato. And on the 8th day after the birth of the boy, there's supposed to be a bris. It's a startling injection of something that doesn't seem to actually fit. The Torah talks about tahor and tameh and korbanot and all of those things, and yet right in the middle, and by the way, and on the 8th day, there's got to be a bris. Like, where did that come from? And why is it introduced? And it's a question that some of the Meforshim try to deal with. And I just want to mention one idea that I think Rabbi Elchanan Samet, who's an Israeli scholar, and he writes a lot on Parshat Shavua and on Chumash, not just Parshat Shavua and Tanakh, actually. So he suggests the following idea, that the Torah injects the idea of Brit Milah, which all of us understand is a source of sin. All of us understand you might have made a bris for a child, a grandchild, a nephew, somebody, in fact, you may have been invited to a bris. So why does the Torah want that idea to be juxtaposed right in the middle of a discussion of something called Tumah? Because, Rabbi Samet posits, life goes on. A person who is tameh is not to be seen as, oh my God, let's not nothing to do with this person. No, there are certain things this person may or may not do, but life goes on. There still is a bris. They're still involved in communal life. They're still involved in family life. They're still involved in doing mitzvot. They're still involved in a simcha. They're still involved in conducting themselves as a vital member of the community, of the family, maybe a shul, maybe a community. And so the Torah wants us to sort of make sure that in our minds, in our conception of understanding how tameh and tahor plays out, not only for a specific individual, but also plays out in the psychological well-being of a person. The Torah says, look, there still is a bris that has to be planned. There still is this simcha that is going to be part of that birth experience. And so maybe that's the reason that it's here. But I want to just veer off in a completely different direction while still maintaining a focal point on Uvayom Hashemini. So this becomes, of course, one of the classic sources for a Brit Milah on the 8th day. So I want to take a look at that. Why the 8th day? And share something really interesting. So first of all, why is it the 8th day? And there's a lot of different reasons. The Gemara has some opinions that are more or lean towards more medical, scientific, suggest that the ability of the body to clot, or the body to sort of blood clot, which is a defensive mechanism. In case there was a cut, the body clots the blood so that the blood doesn't continue to escape from the body. But that mechanism, or the ability of the body to clot, only becomes sufficiently strong on the 8th day. And so a bris that were it to be done prior to the 8th day might place the child, the boy, in greater danger. And so Hashem understands, ultimately, of course, Hashem is the creator, Yotzer HaAdam. And so that's why the 8th day was picked. Now, here's a fascinating question. I just want to raise a name with you. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this name, Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein. So Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein is the Rav of a community in Israel called Ramat El Chanat. It's in Yerushalayim. Rav Zilberstein's father-in-law was the late Rav Elyashiv. And Rav Elyashiv, during his lifetime, certainly the last decades of his life, was considered to be the ultimate authority, certainly for Ashkenazic Yeshivish Litvish community. No question about it. Worldwide. He was recognized as the top of the ladder, whenever, kick the question up, until finally Rav Elyashiv would give a ruling, and that was the ruling. So Rav Zilberstein has put together, he's a prolific Talmud Chacham who writes a lot, and he deals with modern questions and tries to connect them to the Parsha. So you may be familiar with these two series of books, and if not, you should probably take a look at them. One is called What If? I don't know if anybody has this at home. What If? Fascinating halachic discussions for the Shabbos table, arranged according to the weekly Torah reading. So he highlights certain halachic issues that are in the Parsha, and then discusses modern questions. He also has another sort of series which does a similar job. It's called Ve'ha'arevna, Halachic Challenges and Solutions based on the weekly Parsha. So they're fascinating. So I want to share with you what just happened. Are you guys still here? Whoa. Okay. I want to share with you a question that he mentions here. So listen to this question. It's a fascinating question. A Jew approaches the rabbi, and it's on Wednesday. The Jew approaches the rabbi on Tuesday, and he tells the rabbi, "Rabbi, wish me a mazel tov. Had a baby boy, beautiful. Everybody is happy." And the father calls the rabbi, who's a mole, and says, "I want you to come and to do the bris. Today's Tuesday, on Friday." Okay, you want to do the bris on Friday. So the Moel asks the father, obviously, certain questions. How's the baby feeling? How's the mother feeling? And then finally asks, and when was the baby born? And the father says, he was born last week on Wednesday morning. Okay, so let's do the math. Last week, Wednesday morning. So Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So the 8th day is Wednesday. Baby was born on Wednesday. The bris is B'yom HaShmini, Wednesday. The father is calling the Moel on Tuesday, and he's asking for the bris to be done on Friday. So the bris ought to be done on Wednesday. But the father says, I don't want to do it on Wednesday. I want to do it on Friday. Why? It's just inconvenient. People are going to be coming. We want everybody to come. We want everybody to see the baby. We want it to be a simcha. Obviously, maybe there's a little ulterior motive. We want to get the gifts, give everybody a chance. So the father is requesting from the Moel, can you please do the bris on Friday, which is not the 8th day. So it's not at the right time. What's the question? The question is, should the Moel do the bris on Friday, knowing that he's acquiescing to a request that is contrary to the halacha, completely contrary to the halacha, because the bris is supposed to be on the 8th day? And should he take a firm stand and say, look, I'm an Orthodox Mo, this is what I do, this is what I do, I comply with the halacha, what you're asking me to do is keneged the halacha, and therefore I'm not your Moel? Or should the Moel say, okay, it's not the right time, but I'm prepared to do it? Because if he doesn't do it, the Orthodox Moel, the chances are that the father is not going to ask another Orthodox person, and maybe going to somebody who, one, will not follow proper halacha. So just by the way, to make sure that everyone understands, the circumcision is a circumcision is a circumcision. But a circumcision does not necessarily equate to a bris milah. So a man can be circumcised, but that doesn't mean that he's fulfilled the requirement of bris milah. So if the person who did the circumcision did it in a manner that violated halacha, even if the medical result is called the circumcision, the bris milah hasn't happened. So what should the Moel do? Comply with the request, knowing that it is halachically the wrong thing to do? Or should he say, okay, I'll do it, or I won't do it, I don't want to participate, it's on you? So this question got bumped up to Rabbi Zilberstein. Interesting, no? And based on this week's Parsha. So what do you think he said? You're not going to answer, I'm going to tell you what he said. He said to do it on Friday. To do it on Friday, he said yes. Why? Because Rabbi Zilberstein divided or separated between two things. One is the bris, meaning to do the bris in a manner that complies with halachic standards and whatever the processes are that the Moel has to be careful of while doing the bris. But the other part is bismano, at the right time. And while we want the two of them to come together, the reality is they don't always come together. And so, according to Reb Zilberstein, and he also invokes a ruling of Rav Moshe Feinstein of blessed memory, the great North American posek of halacha, died in 1986. And Rav Moshe had a tshuva on this as well. He too was asked the question that was very similar. And Rav Moshe ruled, no, do the bris, do it on Friday. at least the boy will have a halachically kosher brit milah. That it didn't take place at the right time. Okay, that's a separate issue. But it would be appropriate to have the bris done in a proper way. So that was the first idea connected to brit milah. Okay, I want to move a little bit more in this parsha, and to remind everybody that this parsha is a parsha that introduces a topic, and the topic is called Nigaim. Nun Gimel Ayin Yud Mem. And the topic of Nigaim are sort of, in a way, called lesions. Lesions. Lesions are blotches, spots that a person would see on their skin, on their body, in different places in their body. The Torah introduces in this parsha and then expands the scope of these lesions in next week's parsha. The Torah talks about the fact that a person may discover these spots that turn his skin and his hair white on his body. Sometimes it will be a spot that remains isolated to one part of their body, and in some situations, these lesions, this whiteness, will cover the entire body. This condition, as some of you know, is called tzara'at. Tzara'at. Some of the translations in English call this leprosy. I personally am not in favor of that translation. Leprosy is a documented medical condition, and this is not a medical condition. It's a physical manifestation of a spiritual condition. The Gemara Masechet Erkin, Daf Ted Vav Amud Aleph, the 16th page in Masechet, tells us that there were 7 reasons that these afflictions befell people in the time of the Beit HaMikdash. They no longer happen, but 7 reasons. I think the most common one we all know is Lashon Hara, the idea of evil speech. But it's not the only reason. The Gemara says there's other reasons. Shvichut Amin, murder, Ilui Arayot, inappropriate forbidden sexual relationships, Gasut Ruach, arrogance. Arrogance would be considered a reason, according to the Gemara, why a person may be afflicted with tzara'at. Tzarut ayin. Tzarut ayin is stinginess, the unwillingness to open your hand into the help of a fellow Jew. And by the way, some of them, of course, should point out, tzarut ayin, from the word tsar. Tsar means narrow, a narrow eye, meaning you don't see the bigger picture and you don't want to share. You want to sort of make things smaller so you feel better about yourself. I'm not helping, I'm narrow-minded. If you think of the word tzara'at, if you think about it, tzara'at is spelled tzadi reish ayin taf. So take out the ayin, tzarat ayin. It's the smallness, the affliction of the eye, the stinginess that sometimes is the reason for tzara'at. But today, specifically, again, I want to go back to the topic that you've heard a lot about, and it's called Lashon Hara. And I want to address a little bit of it with you because I think it's important. I think it's important that we understand why the Torah makes such a big deal about this. And I don't know whether anybody who's listening tonight, you either personally have ever been involved in a situation of Lashon Hara where somebody has spoken about you, or Chas v'Shalom, we may have spoken about somebody else. But I just want to think about what that means. Lashon Hara. Literally, it means Lashon is tongue or language, Ra, an evil language. And so when you think about evil language, you're thinking about various forms of speech that are harmful. The Rambam in the Mishnah Torah outlines 4 categories by which we abuse the power of speech that we were given by God. What are these 4 categories? The 4 categories, according to the Rambam, are this. The first one is called rechilut. Rechilut, which is a word used in the Torah and Sefer Vayikra, Parshat Kedoshim, Perek Yotev in Vayikra. Not this week's Parsha, but a little later on. Rechilut is when you're talking about somebody to somebody else, and you're saying things which are true. They're not even negative. They're true. They're true. And even those things, according to the Rambam, don't share that. Don't share that. So, for example, turn somebody. Do you know what he paid for the seats that he at the show? Do you have any idea? He paid $800 a ticket. Okay, it's true. Whoever you're talking about paid $800 a ticket. Well, why is that any of your business? And why are you telling other people? What's behind that? What's the motive of sharing that true? It's not a negative. It's not. There's nothing critical about it. It's actually factually correct. But you and I both know that there's something about the way in which that information is conveyed, which can have a negative response in the eyes or the heart of the listener. So that's called rechilut. The second category is called lashon hara. You're also saying something totally true, but this is negative. This is negative. Do you know that he was arrested for that? Can you believe that? He was arrested and charged with that crime. Okay. True, that person was arrested and he was charged with the crime. But that already is a critical piece. That's intended to change a person's attitude. That's intended to make whoever's listening to this piece of information have an emotional response to this information. That's vicious. That ruins people. It creates in my mind and in my heart a reaction that if that person were to come to me, I'm now less likely to have confidence in that person. I may be suspicious of that person. And had you not shared that with me, that would not have been part of my interaction with that person at all. But now that you told me about this, it's changed the whole way I conceive of that person and will forever change my interaction with that person. That's not fair. That's manipulative. You've taken away from me my ability to encounter that person on my terms. And now you injected yourself into that triad, and that's not fair. The third category that the Rambam mentions is called motzi shemra. That's an outright lie. You are stating something that is absolutely false. It's not true. Not true. And the fourth thing that the Rambam says, and this is the most severe of all the four, it's worse than rechilut, it's worse than lashon hara, and it's even worse than actual lies stated about somebody. The Rambam says, what's that fourth category? Ba'al lashon hara. What does Ba'al lashon hara mean? Somebody who regularly likes to yenta and shmooze and share negative pieces of information, lashon hara, with people. These are the people who go to Starbucks, go to a coffee shop, let's sit, let's schmooze. They're talking, and amongst the things that they talk about, they like to tell stories about other people. Yes, and that happens. And according to the Torah, according to so many sources, this type of talk is absolutely harmful. Harmful. You know, the word for controversy and disagreement in Hebrew is machloket. And the Hebrew word machloket has at its core, the word chelek, chet lamed kuf, a part. What does it mean? Because you only see a part of something, and you're okay with that. You don't know the whole story. You just know a part, but that's fine. You feel totally in control. You feel that you have a right to share just a little piece of information. May not be the whole picture, but that's how you start a machloket. You're fine with creating parts. You're fine with creating divisions. One part here, one part there. What's the word for peace? Shalom. And what's the shorus of shalom? Shalem. Whole. This is the one. No, I'm going to want to see the wholeness of a situation. I'm not going to be making judgment. I want to see the whole thing, the whole situation. You can't judge unless you know the whole situation. It's a famous Mishnah in Masechet Avot is Hevedan et kol ha'adam lekaf zchut, and judge every person with the benefit of the doubt, or judge favorably. Now, that's how it's colloquially translated. Hevedan et kol ha'adam lekaf zchut. But the truth of the matter is that that's really a literal mistranslation of the statement of Rabbi Shiur ben Prachia. Rabbi Shiur ben Prachia says, Hevedan et kol ha'adam. The proper translation of the phrase kol ha'adam is the entire person. Kol adam is every person. Kol ha'adam is the whole person. Hevedan et Kol ha'adam lekafsu. Judge the entire person, not just the chelek. Don't start a machloket. You only know one part. You can't judge. You and I and none of us know what's going on behind closed doors of so many, everybody we meet. Everybody we meet. You would say, me, I'm smiling, I'm happy, oh, wow, looking, I'm upbeat. You have no idea what my day was like. And I have no idea what your day was like. And I don't know if you're putting on a great face in order to cover up something that's inside that's painful. You don't know. And therefore, because you don't know, we don't have a right to judge, because I don't know Kol Ha'adam. I have to judge. You know, there's a sometimes people think, oh, come on, Rabbi, that's a one thing, that's nothing. I didn't hurt anybody with one thing. It's just one word. What's one word? One word. Doesn't matter. Really, one word doesn't make a difference. True story. There's a mashgiach who lives in Miami, and he works for one of the kashrus organizations. There's a lot of different kashrus organizations in Miami. And he was assigned to be the mashgiach at a simcha. And he gets to the place that he's mashgiach, and of course he's doing his job, he's checking things out. And the woman, the balat simcha, comes to him and says, you know, I really, really love anchovies in the salad, and the caterer doesn't have any, so I brought a can of anchovies, and I want to put it in the salad. So the mashgiach takes a look at the can of anchovies and says, no, I'm sorry, I can't. There's no hechsher. There's no hechsher. And so this starts, as you can imagine, this starts a disagreement. The woman says, you don't need a hechsher for anchovies. You don't need a hechsher. I've heard this over and over again. You don't need a hechsher. I want the anchovies. And the mashgiach is taking a hard line. I can't do it. It's against the policies of our organization. Every item that we serve has to have a hechsher. There is no hechsher. The lady says, but you don't need a hechsher. That's why there is no hechsher on. And so he says, listen, how about the following? Let me call my supervisor, the rabbi, and he'll guide me. If he says it's okay, it's okay. So he calls his rabbi. This is a true story. He calls the rabbi, and the rabbi was not available to answer the phone. So the mashgiach says, you know what? I'm going to text him. And he says, excuse me, is this woman right? Do we need a hechsher for anchovies? So a few minutes later, he actually gets a text back from the supervising head mashgiach, and it says, no hechsher required. And so, based on the text, he told the staff in the kitchen to serve the anchovies. Now, I'm pretty sure that just about everybody here has already figured out how the story is going to end, right? So the mashgiach meets his supervisor the next day, and so the supervisor says, so how did she react when you told her she couldn't use the anchovies? And the guy said, what are you talking about? You said no hechsher required. He says, no hechsher required. No, I said no hechsher required. So what do you mean? The same three words. The same three words. What was missing? A hyphen, a comma, a period, that's all that was missing. What can it matter? It said nothing. Rabbi, one word, it doesn't matter. And it changed everything. It changes everything. And you and I know that. You and I know that one word can change everything. And as a result of that, the Chachamim took this really, really seriously. Human relations is what sustains us. We all want to belong. According to some psychologists, it's one of the most fundamental needs of society, more than even Freud. Freud thought that sexuality drives so much of human experience, but not everybody. Glasser, for example, amongst others, thought that the need to belong is more deep, is more fundamental, is more pivotal to the human experience than even sexuality. But how can I belong if I'm ostracized? Listen to the following. Listen to the following. One word, right? Just one word. We'll read through Parsha Tazria and then later again, but mostly Parsha Tazria, part of Mitzorah. What's the process? So a person notices has these lesions on his body. He sees that something is turning white. His hair, his skin, something's wrong. It's clearly wrong. So the Torah makes it absolutely clear, you must go to a Kohen. You have to go to a Kohen. So first of all, the fact that the Torah insists that it be the Kohen who does the analysis indicates right away that from the Torah's own perspective, the person well suited to determine whether this is tahor or tameh has to be the priest, has to be the Kohen, because this is not a medical matter specific, it's a spiritual matter. And that's what Kohanim deal with. They deal with ruchnius, they deal with the things having to do with the spirit. So you need to go to the Kohen because he is going to be the person trained to understand. And we'll ask you the questions. And we'll find out whether or not shvichu damim, gilu, have you committed chas v'shalom those sins, and understand whether Hashem is giving a message to the person. You've fallen, you've stumbled, you let your neshama go down the wrong path, and you need a corrective. You need some change in your life, and this is God's way of saying, I'm going to make it happen for you in a very broad way. So now here's the experience. Listen to the following. It's brilliant, brilliant. So according to the Torah, the Kohen has to check the person, may ask him to stay indoors for a week, and go through the whole thing. Now, if the Kohen were to say the word, he's looking, he's checking, and everybody's watching and listening, what is the Kohen going to say? Tahor. If the Kohen were to declare Tahor, the person is Tahor, and life goes on as usual. But if the Kohen were to look at the person and declare Tameh, then this person must leave his home, leave his family, leave his work, and stand outside all three segments of the Jewish community that we're talking about, the desert. He needs to be isolated. He's going to be going far away. He's going out of the camp. He's going out of the camp. Now, just listen to this because I think it's a brilliant. What renders him tahor, or what renders him tameh? What renders him tahor tameh is the declaration of the Kohen. What does the Kohen have to say? One word. That's it. Tahor or tameh. So what's one word? That's the word. One word will change your life for a week, maybe more. One word. That's all it takes, and everything turns upside down. So when you think, what's the big deal? One word. No hechsher required. What's a period? It's not even a word, a comma, a hyphen. What? Yes, what you and I sometimes think to be inconsequential. This can't matter. I was just saying it as a joke. And the truth of the matter is, of course, that I've broken somebody's heart. And I've broken somebody's heart, and it's in not just two pieces, it's in a lot of pieces. So when we think about what Lashon Hara is and can do, it's very serious. And having worked in a school for many years and seeing it with children, I know what kids can do to each other. But the truth is, it's for the adults too. It's for adults too. People, us, sometimes we're just insensitive. We don't think. We let words come out of our mouth, and before they come out of our mouth, we should have stopped. We should have thought about what we're saying. We should have held ourselves back, because what came out of our mouth, you can see somebody going like this, or you feel that person sort of took a step back, and things have changed. And that's the power of Lashon Hara, changing it forever, and forever. And the part about the Rambam that I think, I know it's not the first time we talked about it, but it comes around every year. It's important to remember. The Rambam says there are three people involved in the triad of Lashon Hara. There's a person who speaks Lashon Hara, and you think that must be the worst, speaking Lashon Hara. There's a person about whom the Lashon Hara involves. To those people, you know what happened to Jack? Jack, they're talking about Jack. So Jack is now going to forever feel uncomfortable in the circle of friends because he knows people are talking about him or said things about him, some of which may be lies, some of which may be true, but things that he didn't want to divulge to anybody. He had a right to keep it private. He had a right to keep it a secret. Somebody decided not to honor that and forever make him not the integral part of the group that he was. But the worst person in the triad is not the speaker, and certainly not the victim, the listener. If the listener were to say, I'm sorry, listen, let's change the subject. Can we please change the subject? Then maybe things would have come to a halt. Because there cannot be Lashon Hara without a listener. Nobody's going to just talk to themselves. That's not where I hate to say this word, that's not where the joy, the satisfaction of Lashon Hara comes from. The satisfaction of Lashon Hara comes when you feel that you're sharing something. Do you know what I heard? And everybody gathers around and wants to listen over the cup of coffee, wherever we're doing it, over the Kiddush Club, wherever we are. It's that unfortunate negative excitement that we hear about somebody's downfall, hear somebody's mistake, that often affects us. Okay. I don't want to dwell on this anymore, but I really do want to stress the idea that Lashon Hara matters. And in a little Dvar Torah that Rabbi Pam, the late Rosh Hashiva of Torah V'dat, wrote in one of his Sfarim that was compiled, or his Divrei Torah on the Parsha, he makes a good point that we don't always think about. I'm going to read from his book. Guarding one's tongue is not limited to avoiding Lashon Hara. An often overlooked part of proper speech is the avoidance of ona'at dvarim, verbal abuse, whose source is in Parshat Bahar. That one should not say words to another Jew which cause pain and shame, and from which he cannot defend himself. This includes giving another person a sharp retort or making him the subject of a joke. So the idea of what comes out of our mouth, the speech that we use, is something that we should be spending a little bit more time, not just about Lashon Hara, but the way we frame our experiences in the world around us through our speech, that hopefully builds people up and not down. And as a teacher who's been teaching for a long time, it's so important for teachers to have that sensitivity, because teachers really have so much power in their ability to encourage a child or to humiliate a child, demoralize a child. And I've seen both. I've seen both close to home, where a word that a teacher says makes a child feel like they're $1,000,000. And not even a word. Sometimes it's just a mannerism. Sometimes it's not even a mannerism. It's the lack of something that makes a child feel, I guess my teacher is really disappointed in me, and it's so deflating. Okay. Hopefully we'll understand what we need to do. Okay. I want to move on a little bit in Parsha Kisriya. And we're going to go to Perek Yud Gimel, Pasuk Yud Gimel, 13. So as we open up 13, the Pasuk reads, 1 minute, here it is. Vera'ah kohen v'hinei kista hatzarat et kol bisaro v'tihar et hanaga kulo hafach lavan tahorhu. I'm going to read it in English. These words are often not so familiar because we don't use them a lot. The Kohen shall look, and behold, the affliction, the nega, has covered his entire flesh. Then he, Kohen, shall declare the affliction to be tahor, pure. Having turned completely white, it is pure. Okay, so you notice something odd about that? Why is that odd? Why is that odd? Because what would you have expected? You might have expected, well, if a blotch is complete, if you find one blotch and it can be tameh, then the entire body, doesn't it make sense that the entire body covered head to toe, every spot on a person's body is white with sarat? Shouldn't that be tameh, impure, or whatever qualifications or whatever rules the Torah sets out? That would make sense. So one blotch is tameh. Why would the whole body be tahor? It's not the point. So I want you to hear a interesting explanation from Rabbi Gamliel Rabinovich, who, I don't know this Rav, but he wrote a collection of Divrei Torah on the Parsha called Tuv HaPninim. It's like the best of the pearls, like selections of the great ideas that he has collected in rabbinic language. So I'm going to read part of it. It's fascinating. I'll translate, obviously. People who commit sins, and everybody knows that the person has committed an avera. But because everybody knows that the person did an avera, it's known, it's public. So what does that mean? It means everybody sees, beware, because that person has done something wrong, and you don't want to get mixed up with that person. We know who those people are. And they're careful, they're cautious, they don't come too close, they don't want to get metaphorically burned. But there are some people who have this evil inclination, but the evil inclination is concealed in their heart. And they are not entirely honest about the way they present themselves. They present one way externally, but truthfully, inside, they have different motives, and you're not sure. So you see what they're doing, but you suspect them. Umitra'im ketzadikim. But on the outside, they're dressed like people who are righteous. They say the righteous things. They say the right things. They dress with the right color clothing or not colored clothing. They wear the right kippot. Their dress lengths are right. Their sleeve lengths are right. But something about it strikes you as inappropriate. It's not jiving. It's not resonating. Mehem yesh lefached bioter. From those types of people, you ought to be even more concerned. Ki al yedei ma'asehem shebegalui bekalut yecholim lefatot acherim. Because these people have greater influence. Because they're not entirely transparent about who they are. So it's interesting. He says, the purity that's associated with somebody who's completely covered in sarab seems to be not what you expect. It's not intuitive. Rabbi Rabinowitz suggests maybe what the Torah is trying to tell us is that when we understand, when we see Kol Ha'adam and we can make that assessment, and Chas v'Shalom, it should be an assessment in a manner that's more critical, but it's honest, it's genuine, it's fair, it's balanced, okay. But there are people who always harbor that other side, and they're not upfront, they're not honest. And there's always something about the way in which they deal with you or what they say to you that leaves you feeling unsettled, and you don't feel trust, and you don't feel comfort, and you don't feel whole, you don't feel shalom, you don't feel shalom. And so those people are the people that perhaps you ought to stay away from the most, because they are the ones that are most likely to have the negative impact. Rav Soloveitchik, in his commentary to Sefer Vayikra, stops and ponders an interesting halacha that has to do with the process of diagnosis of the person's tzara'at. And Rav Soloveitchik points out, that there's a pasuk in the Torah that says that the Kohen, v'yatza haKohen al michutz lamachaneh, that now that the person who has been afflicted with tzara'at, he is outside the camp. And so here's the Kohen. And you would think that the Kohen, a man of elevated spirit, a man of elevated spirituality, here is this Kohen, and he's walking through the camp, and everybody sees where he's going. He's going to the place where only people with tzara'at are going to be. And you wonder, well, that's odd. Like, why is the Kohen, it could be even the Kohen Gadol, a person actually had the option of asking that his diagnosis be declared by the Kohen Gadol. The person had the right. He had to say, I want the Kohen Gadol to come check me out. And if I'm Tameh, I want the Kohen Gadol to declare me Tameh. And if I'm Tahor, I want the Kohen Gadol to declare me Tahor. So Rav Soloveitchik points out, what's the significance of the Kohen, or it could be the Kohen Gadol, walking through the camp in full view? He's not, covering himself up that nobody should see where the Kohen Gadol is going. Well, what's the Yatza HaKohen? Why does the Torah want to make a point of that? So I want to read from Rav Soloveitchik's Perush. So just a little bit of clarity. Rav Soloveitchik never wrote a Perush on the Chumash. He didn't. So where is one? what happened was, I don't know how many years ago it is now, between 5 to 10 years ago, his students who faithfully recorded either audio or notes from every shiur the Rav gave, from every shiur. They collected all of his Divrei Torah that he gave in his multiple venues, and they organized the Divrei Torah according to Parshas. And then they posthumously published a Parush on the Chumash with what the Rav said in all the different shiurim he was giving about various psukim. So there really is no Parush that he explicitly wrote, but this is something that he did say in one of the shiurim that he gave. And this came when he gave a shiur in Boston in the year 1977. What's the Jewish approach? The first thing the Torah demands is to bring the Kohen. The Tzarat, the person who had this affliction, was thus instantly removed from mob psychosis. The Kohen diagnosed and pronounced the Tumah as Tzarat, but the person was not subsequently cut off from society. He was in communication with the Kohen as one of the heads of the community. In fact, the Metzorah could request being seen by the Kohen Gadol himself, a man who was not permitted to attend the funeral of his own closest relatives. Yet if summoned, the Kohen Gadol had to go to the Metzorah. So an interesting observation. It is true that the Torah required, as a consequence of bringing machloket between people, you and the things that you said, if this was the reason that you got Sarat, was Lashon Hara, you're being sent out, but you're not being cut off forever. Ad kedei kach, that you have a line of communication with whom? The highest teacher, the Kohen Gadol. You could ask the Kohen Gadol to come to you. And everybody saw that. Everybody saw the Kohen Gadol was going. Kohen Gadol wants to speak to Shmuel. Shmuel called him to check out his Sarat, and the Kohen Gadol is coming. So even if Shmuel is sitting in some degree of regret and repentance outside of the camp, he is still visited by the Kohen, even the Kohen Gadol. The Torah legislated to prevent the loss of human dignity. The Kohen went with the Metzorah outside the camp to demonstrate that he was his friend. The Metzorah was isolated from everyone except the leaders of the camp of Israel, who must do everything possible to heal him and bring him back to society. The Kohen assures the man, you are needed. You will get well. You will return to society. What a fascinating perspective, that even in a person's state of sin, because as I said, the Gemara Masechet Eruvin says that there were 7 reasons a person was afflicted by this, which was Hashem's way of sort of a wake-up call. So he's done something wrong. Clearly, he's done something wrong, to which Hashem is sort of announcing this in a bold way. Maybe nothing else worked, so Hashem had to sort of intervene in a sort of divine intervention worthy of, I guess, a television show. But if that's the case, he is nonetheless connected to the greatness of the Jewish leadership. And so nobody's can say, look, he's a Nebuch, he's an Osvar. Nobody wants to talk with him. Nobody wants to talk with him. The Kohen Gadol wants to talk with him. So you can't call him a housework, even if physically he's something outside. Okay. Okay. So in the process of the Metzorah, the Kohen would declare him Tameh, and he would walk, the man or the woman who was declared to be a Metzorah, he would walk through the camp in the direction of the outer camp where he would be waiting until he would be declared Tahor. And he's passing by. And the Kohen is saying, Tameh, Tameh. The guy himself had to say, I'm Tameh, I'm Tameh. Can you imagine? Can you imagine having to do that? It seems like it's humiliation. And on the one hand, I'm trying to sort of describe a situation where God in the Torah is sensitive to the needs of humans, of people. And here I'm telling you that part of the process was to publicly call out, Tameh, Tameh. Yaakov is walking through the camp, Tameh, Tameh. So you can just imagine people are going to be taking a step back. The Gemara Masechet Shabbos says something interesting. Just sort of stop and think about this just for a few minutes. The Gemara Masechet Shabbos says that what's the point of all that? What's the point of walking through the camp and declaring the person Tameh? It's not to embarrass him and to humiliate him and to bring him to his knees and to break his heart. Although humility and repentance is the proper response. But listen to what the Gemara Masechet Shabbos says. That really what lies behind this is the Rabbim, Hodia Sa'arola Rabbim, to announce and declare and to make known to everybody who's passing by that he's in sorrow. He's in a hard situation. This is a terrible situation to be in. And what? V'yivakshu alav rachamim. V'yivakshu alav rachamim. What that means? And they should daven for him. So that's an interesting idea. To publicly acknowledge that you are in a tzara, you are in a tzara, and to ask people to daven for you. So that's something that I just wanted to think with you about. I have spoken about many, many times that nothing happens in our lives in a random fashion. Believing Jews don't believe in random. We don't believe, oh, that's just a coincidence and there's no meaning behind it. There is meaning. There's definitely meaning behind things. So there's meaning behind things. When things happen to us that are difficult and bring suffering upon us, whether it's physical suffering, spiritual suffering, psychological or emotional suffering, why does it happen? Everybody asks the question, why? The traditional response would be, well, there's a message here for you. And it's not written like in bold letters coming down on a banner from the sky, although that would be good. But it doesn't happen that way. But it's a message to me. Nothing happens to me by accident. So there's something that Hashem wants me to sort of pause and think about. So whatever has happened to this guy is also not random. And he tells everybody, Lo diyatzar rola rabim. He says, this has happened to me. This has happened to me. And so everybody knows, including him, he's made some mistakes. Some of them could be really, really serious. But then when he says to everybody, look at what's happened to me, the next part is critical. And I want you to daven for me. That's a big step. Davening for people. That's important. You know, I know there's a phenomena, and I'm not saying this as a judgment. I'm really not. I know that sometimes when people are ill, they don't want anybody to know. They don't want anybody to. And I'm not saying that I don't understand it, and that's a personal decision. But this Gemara in Masechet Shabbos, as it applies to the Mitzorah, does offer us another way of thinking. And that is, when you tell people that you're not well, you say, will you please daven for me? You are creating a bond, a connection with me. And not only are you creating a connection with people, it could also be a source of healing. Now, I don't know whether every time, let me put it this way. Every time we daven, there's no guarantee that what we daven for, we're going to get. That's not the way davening works. Davening is not like a candy machine where you put in your toonie and out comes the chocolate bar. I'm davening, I get the chocolate bar. I'm davening, I get what I ask for. That's not the way it works. Life doesn't work like that. We all know that. So if it doesn't work like that, so what's the point of it? What's the point? I only want what I want. But we know that Hashem has a bigger picture and understands things that we don't understand. But when I tell somebody I'm not well, I've had a bad diagnosis, chash v'shalom, and it would really mean a lot to me if you would daven for me, for two reasons. One, it makes me feel I'm not alone. And sometimes people who are not well feel alone. They feel very much alone because sometimes they can't go out of their houses. And sometimes they're maybe in the hospital. And sometimes nobody calls them. Nobody visits them. But if they say, if you could daven for me, that would make me feel better. So just the human connection, that sense of belonging, that sense that I'm part of a community, somebody's thinking about me, davening about, that in and of itself has an amazing healing quality. It may not take away the machla. It may not take away the illness. but it may make it easier. It may make it easier for me to know that you're davening for me. And the second thing is, we believe in the efficacy of tefillah. We do believe that davening matters. It can make things better. I don't know when. I don't know which tefillah Hashem is going to answer this way or that way. Nobody does. But in the famous words of Wayne Gretzky, the greatest hockey player ever, and I'm not going to debate yes or no. If you have an opinion, you can message me later. What did Wayne Gretzky say? You will miss 100% of the shots you never take. Meaning that if you never ask, you're never going to get. So maybe Hashem will listen to my davening and say, okay, I wanted you to daven. I was waiting for that tefillah. That's what I was waiting for. I was waiting for you to open your heart to me, says Hashem. And now that you've done that, I'm going to respond. But if you're going to keep quiet, I'll keep quiet too. You never know. And so I think what this Gemara Masechet Shabbos is telling us about the Mitzorah is walking through the people may seem like, on the other hand, oh my God, he's revealing something about himself that may be private and who should know about that? But maybe if we build a community where we care so deeply about each other, where we're successful and maybe even for sure minimizing, but imagine eliminating Lashon Hara and opening up our hearts to people and caring about them, then when you see somebody who's in an eight tzara, in a difficult time, you'll want to daven for them, and they'll want to tell you because they believe that you care deeply for them in a genuine, authentic way. And the more people who daven for something, the greater the power. The greater the power. So I think this particular piece of Gemara Masechet Shabbos, while it may seem to deal with as something that we don't have anymore in our time, there is no more tzara'at. And one of the reasons the Chofetz Chaim says there is no tzara'at, why did this sort of manifestation of moral weakness and failure that the Gemara says in Masechet Erechim, the Lashon Hara, or the arrogance, or the stinginess, well, we have all of those things today. So if we have all of those things, unfortunately, why will we not have tzara'at? So the Chofetz Chaim says we don't have tzara'at because we don't have the mechanism of removing it. And the whole point of the mechanism was to make a person mindful of what he went through and to hopefully bring them to a higher understanding of what they need to do. And without the mechanism, we've lost that ability. And if we've lost that ability, Hashem says the whole point of this phenomena called tzara'at is not possible, because we need the Beit HaMikdash, we need the rituals, and we need the Kohanim to be able to do that. But whether we have the Kohanim the way we need them, whether we have the Beit HaMikdash, and whether we have tzara'at, we still have each other. And we have each other's feelings. And we understand the pain and suffering we can cause when we are not thoughtful about the words that we use, the tone that we use, the language of our hands that we use. And you and I both know that you can cause pain and suffering without a word, with one word for sure, as we've talked about, or even without any word, just by that him, and it's over. So, my friends, thank you for joining tonight. Next week, I'll send out this link again, and please feel free to share with anybody. I would love to have as many people join as possible for the Haggadah Insights, which will happen next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Jonathan, I think you wanted to ask something.
Yeah, got a question, but I wanted to wait for you to finish your announcement.
Okay, yeah, now's a great time.
Okay, wanted just to ask a question, and forgive me if you addressed this. I did briefly, full disclosure, I did briefly step away for a couple of minutes to just get to for a brief bio.
You stepped away at the worst possible time. I said the most amazing things when you stepped away.
There you go. My question relates to the issues that you raised regarding Lashon Hara. And I know it's a meta topic. I know it's a huge topic. But there are, as you know, there are times when we do need to talk about people, or people need to talk about us. My understanding, I think it's called Toelis. Is that right?
Yep.
So can you just, and again, I know it's a meta topic. I'm sure you could have an entire Yarchei Kala about this. But can you just give some sort of brief guidelines as to what constitutes?
So, like, for example, if I were, let's say in my previous, or now, or let's say I'm in a position to hire people for a job that requires certain skill sets, social skill sets, understanding knowledge. So it's totally permissible for me to do a background check on the person who's a candidate for the job. So the person who I'm going to call may be a previous employer or a reference or somebody. So that person has to answer some questions. So that's litoelet, meaning without having that framework, it would not be so appropriate for me to go and ask people, can you tell me about Jack? Why do you want to know about Jack? Oh, I don't want, just I'm interested. That's not a good answer because I'm interviewing him for a job at the company and I just want to make sure that he has all the necessary qualifications to do a good job. Okay, so that's litoelet. Those are the sorts of situations where asking a question makes sense because it's contained within a legitimate environment that information makes sense. But you're 100% right that it's a broad topic and it's not necessarily, okay, everything falls under the rubric of toelet. There's certain things that still may not be open. If I'm looking for a job interview for somebody, there may be questions that I'm still not entitled to ask about the person's private life because that may not be pertinent whatsoever to the job. So I can't couch it under the title of toelet, like there's a benefit to it. There still are limits to that. That is a topic. And one of the things that I was going to bring, I forgot to bring this copy of the book. The Chafetz Chaim, Lessons a Day. It's a book in which the Chafetz Chaim, in his master work about Lashon Hara, and it's a specific topic in halakha, and he goes through this systematically, how and what to do and not to do, what you can say, what you can't say. And it may be helpful to get a copy of this. It's like 5-6 minutes reading a little excerpt every day, and it's calendarized. This is what you do on the first day, the second day, and it goes through the whole year. And it may be one way to help each of us become a little bit more familiar about this situation. And it's, we all talk, thank God. Many of us have the ability to speak, but we don't always have the clarity to know, is this appropriate? Should I be saying this or not? So that's where the Chafetz Chaim, I think, is a guiding book to help us just think it through a little bit more deeply so we can monitor that.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Sorry. Esther, is that you? You want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, you mentioned that a sharp retort, I'm sorry, I'm off screen. A sharp retort or, kind of, I guess, a nasty comment would be considered Lashon Hara. Does that apply inside like a family relationship, or are you only talking about kind of?
No, it can be in a family relationship. You can speak badly about other people in your family. There's no right for one family member to insult another. Just because you're related doesn't give you the right to hurt that person's feelings. So those things apply for sure. And in fact, if you think about it, there are certain family relationships where you can say you have to even be more sensitive about it, like a parent and a child. You need to know how to respond to a child in an appropriate way so that you are giving the right lessons to the child. You may have to do the same thing with a spouse or with a parent. So it does apply. The comment I made, or at least it wasn't my comments, Rabbi Pam, I was reading a little bit from excerpt from his essay. He didn't say it's Lashon Hara, but he did say, Esther, that it's about how to maintain proper speech. So proper speech is the big topic. Lashon Hara falls under that. And so he was giving an example about other things involving speech, which may not technically be Lashon Hara, but it also is a message about how we treat each other verbally. You can verbally abuse somebody.
Yeah,
right? We know that. There is a category called verbal abuse. And regrettably, it happens in families. Way too much. It happens anywhere, but it does happen in families.
Thank you.
So next week, it'll be the same link. So whatever link that you clicked on to come to this tonight is the same link for next week. Again, I remind you, please invite anybody you want to come and hear some Divrei Torah. I think really interesting ones on the Haggadah. You may want to have a pencil and paper handy or some recording device, just in case you could say, I wish I could remember that. I want to go over that for the Seder. I'm happy for you to do that. I will be recording the shiur like I do every time, and that'll be available usually the next day, I think, at the shul's website. And so you can find the I think it's a YouTube, actually, not a recording. I think it's a YouTube, so you can find it on the shul's website. So thank you everybody so much, and I hope you have a week of blessing, of bracha and simcha and health. May we hear much more good news next week than we're hearing this week. May we see the release of the hostages coming back home healthy and safe as soon as possibly can. And I'll see everybody next Tuesday night at 8 p.m. for Haggadah Insights. Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rabbi Diamond.
Bye.